Hello and welcome to Frank's School. I went back to my older shirts. You get to know me better now. I had the number wrong yesterday. That was 65.2. I changed it. Anyway, this is the 66th day. Well, I want to pause to explain what's going on now. What's going on, in case somebody would just come onto this video and wonder. Or especially if you've been coming through and watching the videos in chronological order, you might think, Frank, what are you doing now? Well, I'm looking at a corpus. This is the Latin word for body, but it's also an English word, a corpus. A corpus is a body of literature or a body of language for a linguist that he then studies. He has to have a corpus in order to figure out what's going on in a language. Well, I'm using as a sort of a corpus hymns, especially hymns meant for Christmas. And I intend to do this until the New Year's. Probably every day, like an Advent calendar, once I get started. I haven't really started yet. I'll start with Thanksgiving. Now, what am I doing with this body of literature? Well, I'm examining it as poetry with its literary devices. Yesterday I explained that anastrophe was being used in fading is the worldling's pleasure. Literary devices, verse forms, both of which I taught about the first year when this number was 1. And there's an enhanced vocabulary in poetry. I define poetry as memorable language. And whatever it takes to make that language memorable is available. It doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to have a beat. But an enhanced vocabulary helps, word choice. And I'm going to be using that. I've already begun to use that. I also am using it to explain a little bit about history, because these hymns that I'm looking at are mostly older, over 100 years old. And it seems that a lot of them are going to be from the Victorian period in England. Some of them will be translations from German, which will be fun. I'm also looking at this body of literature in terms of its grammar. When I spoke about a verb ending with th, arm hath bound the restless wave, that, as opposed to st, if it's thou hast, biddest, that's a matter of grammar. I don't really think of that as syntax. And grammar, also I think of it as morphology, how words change their form. That I taught about also in the first year. And then syntax. Let's look at these sentences. How are the words put together? Sin means together. How are they put together? And then I use sentence diagramming, which I taught about before. And these, since it's poetry, with all these literary devices, the sentences will be quite interesting. Maybe I don't think I'll hit one that I can't diagram, because if I did, I don't think it would make sense. I intend to use it for a German-English connection. Eventually, I'll come to one that is a translation from the German, in which case I'll show that. And for somebody who doesn't speak English as their native language, I would think that this would be a good way to really, or you don't speak English as your native language, you speak it, but you'd like to go deeper into it. Well, this body of literature would be a good way to do that. And for me, in German, it has that same effect. The older hymns use German words and grammar and syntax that isn't used in modern German anymore. And that's fun for me. And then I'm also using it because of the music that the literature has been put to. I'll probably discuss tonal harmony to some extent, maybe melody. And for that purpose, I'll mention the composer I have, as well as the author of the text. And for that purpose, that ad hoc choir, that choir that came together to help me with this project, I will be continually using it. So that's what's going on at the moment. But now I want to erase the board and also talk about what's going on in this whole school. So there'll be a second shot in just a moment. Hello, and going on with what's going on now in Frank's school. After the new year, I intend to teach through the Shakespearean play Macbeth. I hope to find what I am a film version of it that I'm comfortable with, that I can recommend. But if not, I'm going to teach through it anyway. If I were in a public school and students were coming back from vacation, that's what I would use to let them settle in. Then I'm going to deal with the Homestead Engineer's Handbook. I have it around here somewhere. I should have got it out to show it to you, to hold it. I did show it to you before. That and wedges. The Homestead Engineer's Handbook is a book I began to write. Darn, I wish I could just see it and grab it. I might be upstairs. I made 40 copies of it, all the way back in 1973, I think it was. But anyway, I'm going to show you about it with Wedge's Paradigm. And I may do that before Christmas, because when I have everything ready to show you this part of it and some of that, I'll probably go ahead with that. And then the Decentralist Manifesto, which is the name I give to the introduction to the working papers for the Homestead Engineer's Handbook. It's about 50 pages long. I've just resolved that I need to rekey it. I need to type it up again, which I'll do. And when that's done, and I can say it's either published online or it's in my blog or something, at that point I'll talk through that. That is political and economic in nature. That will almost certainly wait until after the new year. Now, projects that are going on. Eventually, I think I'm going to end up shifting the school's attention more outside and to other places, to projects. At the moment, the Beast is this huge outdoor furnace that has been growing. It's not done. It continues to grow. The Neighbor's Barn, that's a project which is still ongoing. Recycling concrete blocks. I'm not finished with that. I'll show you more about that. Contour gardening. I'll certainly show you more about contour gardening. Those are and the fireplace that I'm building down there in the lower barn. Those are projects which you'll see more of gradually. Those are going on, and they're all related actually, as I'll show you in a moment. Then I'm going to begin to talk about a trip to Europe. At a certain point. This will be the third time since Frank's school has begun. First time it was this, I called it Frank's Tour d'Europe, that enormous train trip I took. Then the second time was to Portugal and Galicia in the company of Shirley Hockling. This time it will be and I'm fairly sure I'll do it. It'll probably be in March that I do this. And this time it'll be to go to northern Germany. And its purpose, to visit the Hocklings, Thomas and Shirley, and hopefully they're both going to accompany me as we look at open-air museums. There are many open-air museums in Europe, northern Europe especially. And I'm not ready to tell you all about this yet, but there'll be a point where I will tell you about it, partly to coach you in how do you go about planning a trip to Europe. And now I gathered all of this stuff together because all of this stuff really is related to the Old and Other Ways Museum. I am making a museum. I don't know what the future of it's going to be, but I intend to make it. And I'm pretty excited about it. I've worked on it, in a sense, all my life. And now it's coming to fruition. So that will, and the one other thing is I probably, related to this European trip, I'll go back to teaching German, loving German. That's the way I called it last time. I don't put myself out as the best of German teachers, but I love the German language. And it would be helpful to me since I'll be totally immersed in German, and so I'll probably go back to that. So, now you know what's going on. See you next time.